Hovoríme o meste. Mesto, to je téma tohto 6. dňa. Dní architektúry a dizajnu a Dní architektúry a filmu. A ešte raz vďaka partnerom tohto podujatia. Ja už som niektorých spomenul, doplním, že partnermi sú aj ITB, JNT Real Estate, Penta Real Estate, YIT, Corvin, Archikód, Vavrica Architekti a Kresko Real Estate. Aj s prácou a aktuálnymi projektami týchto developerov sme sa postretávali v priebehu týždňa a v priebehu ostatných dní. Špeciálnymi partnermi sú Bratislavské kultúrne a informačné stredisko, České centrum, Veľvyslanectvo Českej republiky, Taliansky inštitút, Francúzsky inštitút, Goetheho inštitút, EUNIC, STU, Fakulta architektúry a dizajnu, PUN, Slovenská komora architektov a Metropolitný inštitút Bratislavy, ktorý bol zastúpený aj v priebehu dneška v tom našom rozprávaní a v diskutovaní. Hlavnými mediálnymi partnermi Dní architektúry a dizajnu sú denník N, Arch, Projekt, Inba a www.archinfo.sk. Ani na tento dôležitý web nezabúdame. No a už v rámci tej ďakovačky, toho prehľadu partnerov som ich spomínal a rád ich spomeniem opäť. Ešte si dnes pozrieme v rámci nášho programu aj prezentáciu jedného z našich hlavných partnerov, SPP, no a SPP zastupuje na Dňoch architektúry a dizajnu David Cepláky, špecialista na ESCO riešenia. Dobrý večer, vítajte.
Dobrý večer, ďakujem za predstavenie.
Tešíme sa, že ste s Dňami architektúry a dizajnu a teda som zvedavý na tú vašu prezentáciu, na tie vaše informácie, ktoré nám prinášate. Nech sa páči.
Ďakujem za slovo. Začal by som asi profilom spoločnosti a predstavením jeho alebo našeho portfólia poskytovaných energetických riešení pre našich klientov a zákazníkov, ktorí sú z celého segmentu obchodného trhu. V prvom rade, alebo na začiatok by som spomenul profil spoločnosti a obchodnú činnosť, ktorej sa venuje. Vo všeobecnosti je známe, že SPP je dlhoročným, spoľahlivým a stabilným partnerom pri dodávke energií. Z historického hľadiska táto dodávka energií začínala len pre dodávateľov, respektíve odberateľov zemného plynu. Väčšou flexibilitou a orientáciou sa aj na ostatné energetické trhy SPP od roku 2012 je už aj dodávateľom elektrickej energie. A z pohľadu počtu odberateľov SPP je najväčším dodávateľom zemného plynu na Slovensku. V prípade elektrickej energie je štvrtým najväčším dodávateľom za tradičnými dodávateľmi elektrickej energie. V roku 2019 štát vyhlásil aukciu na výkupcu zelenej energie, to znamená energie vyrobenej nízkoemisným až bezemisným spôsobom, to znamená na báze obnoviteľných zdrojov a kogenerácie, respektíve kombinovanej výroby. SPP sa zapojil do tejto aukcie, no a od roku 2012 je povinným výkupcom tejto zelenej energie, ktorú ponúka a respektíve aj dodáva svojim zákazníkom a ponúka ju aj potenciálnym budúcim zákazníkom SPP. SPP rozvíja svoju obchodnú činnosť nielen na Slovensku, ale aj v zahraničí, konkrétne v Českej republike, prostredníctvom svojej dcerskej spoločnosti SPP.cz. By som predstavil v krátkosti údaje ohľadom dodávok energií za rok 2020. SPP sa orientuje aj v oblasti mobility, respektíve odvetvia dopravy, kde prostredníctvom svojej dcerskej spoločnosti SPP CNG, ktorá prevádzkuje niekoľko plniacich staníc na stlačený zemný plyn. V tomto segmente sa snaží, alebo tento segment sa snaží rozvíjať, to znamená budovaním ďalších plniacich staníc na stlačený zemný plyn. Naše portfólio, alebo to neustále kreované portfólio poskytovaných služieb pre zlepšenie alebo optimalizáciu výroby alebo aj spotreby pre našich zákazníkov a poskytovaných technických riešení. Vychádzajú tieto riešenia z nasledovných kritérií, ktoré sú tu uvedené, napríklad dôraz na energetickú efektívnosť, na zvyšovanie podielu nízkoemisnej až bezemisnej výroby energií, to znamená energií na báze obnoviteľných zdrojov alebo kogenerácií. Pričom táto výroba je sústredená decentralizáciou, to znamená výroba na mieste spotreby, tak, aby naši zákazníci nemali dodatočné náklady na zbytočnú dodávku alebo nadmernú dodávku energií do miesta spotreby. Pritom, alebo v neposlednom rade sa medzi tieto kritéria patrí aj využívanie alebo potenciál využívania dostupných lokálnych zdrojov na báze obnoviteľných zdrojov. Naše portfólio poskytovaných služieb, ktoré sa neustále kreuje, zahŕňa niekoľko oblastí. Spomeniem oblasť tepelnej energetiky, kde ponúkame technické riešenia ohľadom zdrojovej časti. Také možno špecifikum je dodávka chladu. Tu ponúkame odberným miestam alebo odberateľom v blízkosti, nachádzajúcich sa v blízkosti nášho areálu, keďže tento chlad je vyrábaný z tepla a distribuovaný pre potreby alebo požiadavky zákazníkov. Je možnosť tento chlad vyrábať priamo na mieste spotreby rôznymi technológiami. To znamená, dodá sa teplo a na mieste sa prostredníctvom technológií vyrobí chlad a distribuje sa potom alebo v rámci možností na mieste spotreby. Ďalšou oblasťou je oblasť elektrickej energie, kde SPP ponúka možnosť budovania a prevádzkovania čistých energetických zdrojov na produkciu elektrickej energie. Táto energia, alebo benefit pre zákazníka v tejto oblasti je ponúkanie alebo výroba zelenej energie, to znamená energie vyrobenej na báze obnoviteľných zdrojov. Ďalšia taká oblasť, kde poskytujeme naše služby, je energetický manažment, to znamená optimalizácia výroby a spotreby energií. A v neposlednom rade je to aj oblasť osvetlenia a vzduchotechniky. V krátkosti by som predstavil procesný model projektov, ktoré ponúka spoločnosť SPP. Tento procesný model sa skladá z niekoľkých fáz. V prvom rade alebo v prvom kroku je to identifikácia potrieb alebo požiadaviek zákazníka. Následne sa vypracováva energetická analýza, ktorá v sebe zahŕňa hodnotenie skutkového technického stavu, navrhnuté opatrenia. Táto analýza vychádza z poskytnutých údajov, ktoré by mali byť čo najrelevantnejšie. Po predstavení toho technického riešenia nastáva predstavenie finančného modelu a konceptu projektu. Po vzájomnej dohode už nastáva potom podpis zmluvy a fáza realizácie. Táto je ukončená odovzdaním diela, ale zase závisí to na parametre konkrétneho projektu. Táto zmluva môže pokračovať, alebo zmluvný vzťah môže pokračovať aj po odovzdaní diela prevádzkou diela na určité obdobie. Ako som v krátkosti predstavil ten finančný model a tie jednotlivé fázy, tak tu sú konkrétne vypísané s konkrétnymi špecifikáciami. Benefitom, prečo by zákazníci mali si vybrať, alebo prečo by mali byť vhodný práve finančný model a technické riešenie od SPP, je v prvom rade zvýšenie energetickej efektívnosti, čo súvisí s optimalizáciou výroby a spotreby energií a v neposlednom rade aj s ekologizáciou, to znamená zníženie negatívnych dopadov na životné prostredie. V Druhým takým benefitom, pomerne asi dôležitým, je finančné hľadisko a finančné rizika, kedy sa ponúka, alebo SPP na základe parametrov projektu je schopné čiastočne alebo úplne zabezpečiť financovanie investičných nákladov, ale aj prevádzkových. A ďalší taký benefit je úspora nákladov na energie. Pri kreovaní portfólia poskytovaných služieb a teda aj technického riešenia pre našich klientov a našich zákazníkov, tak tieto technické riešenia vychádzajú alebo respektíve rešpektujú a zahŕňajú legislatívu v oblasti energetiky a klímy, a teda či už národnej alebo európskej. A pri riešení alebo tých technických riešeniach sa snažíme, aby SPP prispievalo k národným indikatívnym, ale aj európskym cieľom. V tomto momente je to do mňa všetko, tak v krátkosti. Ďakujem za pozornosť.
My vám ďakujeme za váš príspevok do programu Dni architektúry a dizajnu a teda hlavne ďakujeme vám za to, že ste partnermi tohto podujatia. SPP zastupoval práve teraz David Cepláky, veľmi ma tešilo.
Aj mňa.
Ďakujeme pekne a teda aj do SPP posielame veľkú vďaku za Daad a za Daaf a želáme veľa úspechov do tých ďalších mesiacov, do ďalšieho podnikania. No a sledujete nás 7 dní, našli ste si snáď to, čo vás v našom programe zaujalo, niektorí ste nám venovali viac pozornosti, niektorí menej. Veríme, že sme vám urobili radosť a priniesli témy, ktoré rezonujú vo svete architektúry a dizajnu a ktoré sa nejakým spôsobom dotýkajú aj vás. Dnes je špeciálny deň, naozaj plný informácií, plný prezentácií a týka sa do veľkej miery mesta. No a sme pri záverečnom hostovi dnešného večera a teda myslím, že to dramaturgický tím tohto festivalu vybral veľmi dobré, veľmi príjemným spôsobom. Uzavrieme to festivalové dianie. Predstaví sa vám teraz bruselský krajinný architekt Bas Smets. Jeho projekty mestských priestorov, ale aj plenéru reflektujú najaktuálnejšie otázky v oblasti udržateľnosti zásahov do prostredia. Bas Smets v drobných zadaniach, ale aj v rozsiahlých územných útvaroch presadzuje nasledovania hodnú neinvazívnu formu dotvárania miest a krajinných celkov. V kontexte tej súčasnej krajinárskej tvorby osobný a osobitý prístup ateliéru produkuje maximálnu kvalitu s puncom jedinečnosti. I believe that we are in connection. Bas, are you with us? Good evening. I can't hear you.
You cannot hear me?
Now it's perfect. I can hear you. Okay. Thank you very much. Good evening. Hello. Thank you for joining us. And let me tell you, you are the special guest of this festival because you are the last speaker of this event. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
Very good. Very good.
Thank you very much.
Very, very happy to be part of this, even through Zoom and internet.
We are honored to have you with us, and we are looking forward to hearing your presentation. If you are prepared, if you are ready, we're listening.
How many are you? Because I only see you. You don't have a camera to the audience?
There's no audience. That's only online stream.
Okay, because normally when you do online streaming, you see how many people are following, but here I only see
only
you.
Me and staff of the studio.
Okay, that's the new times, right? All right, I'll see if I can share my screen.
But a lot of viewers of this stream.
So hello to everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so thank you very much for inviting me to this festival. I've prepared a couple of projects that I want to share with you. We can also discuss the things afterwards. But let me begin with a short introduction. A short introduction on the notion of landscape itself. And it's interesting to know that the word landscape was used for the first time in the 15th century not to speak about the outdoor physical reality, but to speak about a new genre in paintings. So the word landscape was really used in the art world to speak about paintings, to speak about a specific type of paintings that showed windows, as you can see here on this beautiful painting by Van Eyck. And in this window, the painter cut himself a piece of liberty away from, or let's say unrelated to the scene he was supposed to depict. And you can see that all the elements of nature are organized through perspective. That came from Italy. And in a sense, the window allowed the painter to imagine new landscapes. This is 15th century, Van Eyck. If I jump 100 years later, with this beautiful painting of Platinier, these are all painters from the Low Countries, so the northern part of Belgium, the southern part of Netherlands. And here there's a major shift. Platinier switches the hierarchy between foreground and background. His commission was to paint the flight to Egypt, but I think we calculated it's about 8% of the painting. 92% he's devoted to playing with atmospheric perspective, going from the brown to the green to the blue, and really playing with an imagined landscape that he's trying to give shape. 100 years later, the same painting, the flight to Egypt. This is Bruegel the Elder. He perfectionizes the atmospheric perspective, as you can see here. And again, he's less interested in his commission and much more interested in showing this imagined landscape. And so it's interesting to realize that landscape, when it was used first, was not speaking about an existing part of the world or of nature, but about a way to organize elements of nature. 100 years later, Claude Lorrain, again, he's not going outside with his easel to paint what he sees, but he's depicting scenes from Virgil, as you can see on this painting. And last one, Turner, who again tries to show you something that you might not have seen. For example, here he's showing the mist above the Thames. And Oscar Wilde writes about these paintings, and he's saying that we needed Turner to see the mist above the Thames, and this whole idea that these paintings, these ways of seeing landscape, show you what's already there, and that I think is super important. And I often refer to this French philosopher called Alain Roger, who says that land is the starting point, is the existing matter. Landscape is a way of seeing it, a way of dealing with it. And he says this process from land to landscape is an artistic process that's at the center of the project that we try to make. From this introduction, I go to a famous drawing made by Alexander von Humboldt in the 1800s. He's trying to understand how different elements of nature work and how they are interrelated. And he's really the first explorer to try to understand how it all functions. And this is a very beautiful piece of his book, where he tries to understand things. So he's taking all types of measurements, from the temperature to the altitude to the type of plants, but also the blueness of the sky, because back then they were trying to understand how things are interrelated. And I think it's super important because he, through drawing, through observation, tries to understand how for example, plants are distributed because of altitude, or how the isothermal charts can be made for the whole planet. So he's really maybe the first to really try to understand how the biosphere functions. 50 years later, Eugène Viollet-le-Duc goes to the Mont Blanc mountains. He's been going there for 10 years, and he tries to understand how erosion works, how glaciers works, and he makes this beautiful map of the Mont Blanc. where he shows both the Mont Blanc as it is today, but also how it should be. So he goes further than von Humboldt, who is trying to understand, but he doesn't intervene. Viollet-le-Duc tries to bring the mountain back to what its pristine state should be. And so from this idea that the landscape is something that's imagined first and made later, from the observations of von Humboldt and the intervention of Viollet-le-Duc, I wanted to give this as an introduction to maybe the universe in which we try to operate. So we have been working in many countries. We've built in 12 different countries, not because we try to build in as many countries as possible, but because every other culture context is again a way of exploring, a way of understanding how we can intervene, a way of understanding how we can make or how we can transform the land into a landscape. And so I will walk you through 5 projects that we've made recently to illustrate this. The first one is at the Ionic Sea. It's on the Albanian coast, a little town called Himara, on the opposite side of the heel of Italy, where a seawall had been made, a 2-meter high retention wall to save the beach down from the tides of the Mediterranean. But this was problematic for 2 reasons. The first reason was that going down to the beach, you had to take these small staircases that were really not inviting. And secondly, you could hardly see the water because of this seawall on top of which a parking had been built. And as you can see, the waterfront was not very attractive. Sitting at these tables, you would see cars and these strange planters, but you would not see the Mediterranean. So when we did the competition, we were wondering what could be, what should we do? I mean, should we make this thing nicer? Should we ban the cars? How could we intervene? And we actually understood that we had to make a landscape again. We had to make a landscape again, breaking down the seawall, replacing it with terraces that go up slowly. We worked with a maritime engineer that told us that this would absorb the waves much better than a vertical wall. And then once we were outside of the salty water, we imagined to bring back trees. And in a way, we tried to bring back a coastal pine forest, as you could find up north of the city of Himara. And so for about 350 meters, we applied this principle, sloping down from the waterfront to the sea, trees where we can, and then we try to find a nice curve that responds to the curve of the waves themselves. And so the whole project was made in a number of sections, where the terraces, the road, the seating areas, all are made in the same material, a concrete made with the sand from the beach, so that you get one continuity from the water to the facade. And so if this was before, and again you see the wall of 2 meters between the sand and the waterfront. This was the image that we had made, and then this is what we have built since. And so you can see that suddenly it's used in a very different way. I like this picture a lot, where you see the pine trees and then the umbrellas, but you can see that there is one single continuity towards the facades over this 350 meters. We planted maritime pines along the slope, and then we planted plane trees. You can see here, when there were little squares or plazas along the waterfront. We proposed to ban the cars, but they said, no, we cannot do it. But then they did it by themselves. And since we had made the road in the same materiality, you don't feel the road, but it's still accessible in case of a emergency for fire trucks, of course. And so here you see how this suddenly, as if it's always been there in a sense, and that's I think that's So I really like this project where in the end you feel like it's found its vocation, this is how it should have been from the beginning. And so here you see how the hotels and the restaurants have been upgraded since, and especially from everywhere you see the main attraction of the town, the Mediterranean, as you can see on this image. I like this image a lot, where you can see that by planting these pine trees, by continuing this kind of almost like a solidified sand beach, these platforms, by planting the plane trees, as you can see here. When you're in the water, you first see this coastal pine forest, and then behind you see the whole urbanization. So in a sense, we brought back a piece of landscape to a place that had lost this connection. From Albania, I go to Brussels, where our office is located. And here we did a lot of explorations to understand how it works. What does topography do? Brussels had lost its river when it was canalized in the 19th century. There are still contour lines, there's still a valley. We speak of high city, low city, but basically it's a valley in which a canal had been built. The railroad tracks are parallel to the contour lines. And then let's say the green areas are quite fragmented. As you can see, the valley had been deforested. And so we're wondering, how can we find a kind of logic to this nature? And we felt that it was quite vulnerable to any type of intervention. And it was only when we zoomed out and worked at different scales that we understood that these rivers are not glaciers that carve their way through the territory for 3,000 kilometers like the Rhone or the Rhine would do, but they're rain rivers. They're mostly taking water from a flat area and bringing it to the North Sea, which means that the tributaries or the secondary rivers are almost as important as the main river, since they carry the same water, being the rainwater. And so when we superpose these tributaries, which are really they're streams, right? It's not a big river, but we understood that actually 80% of all the green areas are directly linked to this system of tributaries. So we said, well, you should imagine 8 projects for each tributary, making continuous parks, reinventing Olmsted in a sense, and especially store rainwater there to diminish the problem of inundations. Here you see all the inundations that had happened over the last 10 years in Brussels. So we said, well, it's very straightforward. You should make these parks as water retention. And so we did this study, and afterwards we were asked by a promoter, a developer, to think about one of the emblematic anti-sites in Brussels. This is a 45-hectare site called Tour and Taxis next to the canal, as you can see here. And so we understood that the railroad tracks to bring in the goods, this was a multimodal point where all goods would enter Brussels, that they were actually following a small stream. So we thought that could be an interesting way to find the vocation of this site. Can we not see it as a tributary, and can we not use the logics of this tributary to give shape to this park? So the idea was that the developer would first build 1 hectare of park before he started developing. That was the promise he made to the city. And we told him, instead of developing 1 hectare, let's develop 4 with the same money. So 4 times cheaper, but a much bigger impact. So starting from the industrial heritage, we made these paths that kind of mimic the logic of water and as rails had done. And then we looked at spontaneous vegetation that had grown along the berms and how they could then become more urbanized when we arrived at the canal itself. And we were thinking so this is the site. These are all 19th century parks. So we're thinking, let's make a park at the scale of what they did in the 19th century. This is a beautiful park, La Combre in Brussels, and you see that there's a play with topography, with water, with trees. And so we thought, can we not use, or we said we should do at least as good as they did 100 years ago, except that our site had been totally flattened. there had been added 80 centimeters of ballast. Ballast is these stones in which they put the railroad tracks. And of course, since we said we will do 4 hectares instead of 1, I had about 20 euros per square meter. But so we said, let's not take away the ballast. Let's not waste money on that, but let's reshape the terrain. Let's give it a natural form, and let's use the ballast underneath as a water reservoir. And we planted 3,000 pioneer trees, fast-growing small trees, and 300 slower-growing climatic or climax trees that would follow in the footsteps of the pioneer trees. So first, the pioneer trees grew, as you will see in the pictures later on. But so it was this idea of we will reuse everything on site. We will not bring earth. We will not bring any type of material. We just work with what we have. And then we understood that we could store water in the ballast because there's a lot of interstitial space. And we calculated that we could store 1 million liters of water on site, which of course was very interesting to the developer because that meant he did not have to make underground cisterns, but he could use the park as part of the scheme. So I like this picture a lot, where we worked with the hydraulics experts to see how the whole park could be a performing park, so not decoration, but part of the whole scheme. So here you see the scraping off of the ballast that had been put there for the railroad tracks. We filtered them through this machine in 3 types of sizes. We reuse the ballast for this underground reservoir, and then you can see how we shape it. We planted clover. We didn't have money to bring earth and grass. We planted clover, and the clover over time, 2 years' time, brought the grass back. And so here you see this glowing or this kind of undulating landscape underneath which we stored all the ballast that we didn't know where to bring. Here you see these pioneer trees and the bigger trees. So in a way, we use the ecological succession that nature would do to create this park that is a park in evolution. So it's a 10 hectares park that is still growing. The trees are growing, and since we opened it from the beginning, those 4 hectares, it's become really a part of this neighborhood. So from the reuse of existing materials, we go to a very different situation in Paris, in the business district of La Défense. This is the big axis, and the arch is right here. This is called the knit, concrete shell. And in between the knit and this is called coupole, there was a road, a kind of urban boulevard entering the esplanade, about 10 meters lower, on which a new skyscraper was built. They found 1,000, if I remember, or they injected 1,000 columns to support the skyscraper, and around the skyscraper, 4,000 square meters of new public space was created, connecting the level of the esplanade with the lower lying level of the neighborhood, but also the intermediate level of this part. So we were asked to design those 4,000 square meters of floating plaza underneath which cars and trucks entered the esplanade. So totally disconnected from the soil. We thought it's quite similar to Du Mont Blanc of Viollet-le-Duc, in a sense that all the glass skyscrapers reminded me of glaciers. All the hardscape reminded me of rocks. The only thing I thought was missing was the tree line. The tree line is the line or the altitude above which no trees grow. And we thought, can we not imagine our intervention as using these logics of nature, introducing a tree line, introducing a hardscape that then would transform into stairs when we go down. So it became a very straightforward project where we tried to plant as many trees as we could, and we tried to have one single type of stone for all the elements, both the stairs, the retaining walls, or the flooring itself. And it was quite interesting because we were obliged to plant 9 trees. That was a kind of environmental study that said that 9 trees needed to be planted, and we planted 50 in the end. We planted them in a very shallow soil, as I will explain, but we created a large volume of soil for the roots to grow in. So this is a CGI. I'll show you pictures of the project realized. So we finished it this summer. Here you can see all these trees are planted really in 50 centimeters of available depth, but we deploy this 50 centimeters over the whole area. And so in a way, looking at all the constraints, for example, these are the concrete elements supporting the public space. Of course, we took them. I mean, we took them out of the equation, but we put as much earth as we could in between them. And then looking at how to plant the trees, I didn't want to make a composition, but we looked at all the constraints again, from the fire trucks to the ADA accessibility to these beams. We kind of looked at the kind of non-plantable zones and planted all the rest, as nature would do, in a kind of opportunistic way, try to plant as many as we could. And so you see here, this isometric view, the trees, and then the stairs that kind of flow down as if it was an avalanche in a mountain range. So here you see the trees sticking out of this carpet of stones that follow you or that lead you all the way down. So here you see some construction pictures. This is this 50 centimeters I was speaking about. Earth everywhere underneath the beams. On the beams, a protective layer. Here you see again a bottle as reference. Only 50 centimeters, and then on the beams, these big slabs were laid, open joints, so all the rainwater goes directly to the fertile soil in which the trees grow. So the trees basically have about 4,000 square meters of available soil, even if they stick out of these 50 by 50 centimeter holes. We prepared them 3 years in advance in the tree nursery to really have this horizontal growth of these trees. As you can see, they're developing well. They're about 10 meters high right now, and you really get a kind of intimacy within all these glass towers of the business district. So here you can see that we use the same granite on the walls, and I quite like this image, the glaciers of the skyscrapers, and then this tree line that we introduced in this very harsh environment. The developer is quite pleased with us, so he asked us if we could also plant the terraces, and here we try to compress 3,000 vertical meters of vegetation into 150 meters of skyscraper, ending with the pine trees on the highest level, framing your view of Paris. So from this, and I'm quite interested in these situations where it's a man-made environment, nature cannot come back by itself. How can we find a similar situation in nature, and how can we learn from nature to bring trees or other vegetation back? We use the same strategy here in London. We're at a courtyard of an office that was turned into a boutique hotel. And discussing with the architects, I was trying to see how we could bring in soil. And since they had these kind of passages on the inside, I thought, can we not make a U-beam and use the space in the beam to have drainage, to have soil, to have irrigation, to have humidity detectors? It's everything is in the section that we then applied, as you can see here, on all levels. So really creating this continuous linear planters in which we planted 500 climbing plants. It's a hotel, it's a restaurant on different levels. So there is a kind of microclimate because of all the humans and the movement of the humans. So we could plant these plants that we could not have on the outside of the building. So there's jasmine, there's passion fruit, and it's quite amazing because you're 10 minutes away from the British Museum, so you're right in the center of London, and you enter the hotel, and wow, you're in a whole different atmosphere. we won the prize for the best outdoor hotel of the world a year ago with this project. And so the funny thing was that the client was very happy, and when I go there once a year to just see how it evolves, and he was showing me there was a tropical bird that had nested in the climbing plants, and had chosen his hotel as its home. And from this, I go to Arle, which is maybe the most ambitious project we've done so far, trying to imagine a landscape where there was none before. In Arle, we're looking at a 10 hectares industrial zone. It was carved out of the bedrock by the railway company about 100 years ago. With dynamite, they blasted away all the rocks and created a perfectly horizontal platform on which they made these industrial buildings, in which locomotives of trains were repaired and were assembled. And so the interesting thing is that since it was blasted out of the bedrock, there was no soil and no water, so no vegetation. Because we learned a lot from the project in Brussels, but in Brussels there was soil, so that there was a kind of pioneer vegetation that was there. Here, nothing, nothing, and this in a big contrast to the richness of the landscapes around the city of Arles. So you have the Kro, which is the former riverbed of a glacier, where there's this waterproof layer of clay that doesn't allow trees to develop, so a very barren space. Then you have the Camargue, which is the estuary plain of the Rhone that goes into the Mediterranean right here. So very wet, windswept, but very, very, very wet and rich in aquatic life. And then you have the Alpi, which is the southern branch of the Alps, very mineral, very different vegetation. And so I was quite intrigued by the fact that Arle was surrounded by these three very different landscapes, and the site itself was totally sterile. So I was wondering from the first day, how can we bring nature back to this site, and how can that relate to these different landscapes surrounding the site? And reading into it and understanding it more, we understood that this is one of the richest places in the world in terms of biodiversity, after the Amazon, of course. But so this richness was in total contrast with the site itself. We explored these different landscapes from the air, on foot, on a horse, to really understand the textures, the colors, the scale of it, and how really understanding what I would call the logics of nature. For example, here, how do these pine trees grow in this mineral environment? How do they use the cracks to develop their roots, and how could we transpose these logics, these strategies, these plant strategies on our site? This is a picture taking in the Alpi. This is a picture taking in the Camargue, where you would have these tamarisk trees that could grow, although there was this Mistral wind blowing, or again how aquatic plants filter the water and create environments for animal life. So from these ideas, we thought, okay, can we use the Parc des Ateliers as a kind of experiment? Because we thought if we can bring life back on this side, in the heat, without water, without soil, in the wind, then we can really do it on other sites as well. Now you must know that the site or the project is a project by the Luma Foundation. It's a Swiss foundation led by Maya Hoffmann, and she wanted to make a place for the production of art and science. And so in a sense, of course, that helped us to think, how can this become an experiment that we can learn from, and that can help us and help others to bring nature back to these industrial post-industrial sites. So the site is linked by this loop of existing trees to the city. The city of Arle was the second most important Roman city after Rome. with a arena, with an amphitheater, very mineral, very small scale public space. So this was an opportunity to make a park for this cultural side, but also a park for the city and the inhabitants of Arles. And so it took us a while to understand what the vocation was, because of course there was nothing left anymore of what was there before. So we tried not to go back in the past, but we tried to go faster into the future. And that was a very important notion to imagine what would nature have done over time. And there is this Mistral winds coming from the north. So we thought the winds would create a topography. They would bring sediments, and this topography would then allow different types of vegetation to grow in. So we looked at all the constraints. We were not allowed to dig because part of it was an archaeology site. But so we imagined these winds. We modeled them, and we imagined how they would make a topography in between those industrial buildings. And so from this topography, and we would dig down 1.5 meters to create a pond. We would go up 3.5 meters here to create a hill. And so from this topography, from its exposure to the sun, to the wind, and its proximity to the water, we imagined different climatic conditions in which different type of species could grow, from the Camargue species next to the water to the Alpi species next to on the more rocky hilltops, to the Gros with its clay layer that we used to create the waterproofing of the lake. And so really the whole site was developed from this idea of what would happen over 100 years, over 200 years, and how can we accelerate that process. So here you see where we were allowed to dig. We dug out the lake. We used that to make these hills. The hills are shaped by the wind, with one side that has a soft slope, and this side is facing north, which means that you're having the refreshing winds in summer, and you're protected from the sun by the trees, while in winter you would walk on the sun side and be protected from the cold winds by the trees. So in a sense, we made an asymmetrical section that helped to create a climatic comfort both in summer and in winter because of its asymmetry. And then in function of the available soil, we imagined the whole ecological succession of trees, which is called climax, from the pioneer species to the species that would come, what we call the climatic or the climax trees that would come 200 years later. And what was interesting is that, in a sense, by building it up like this, if you would walk into space, you would walk into time. So the more the hill becomes bigger, the more you're advancing into time, into the future. And so again, not repairing what has been there, because we don't know, it's been too long, but trying to go faster into the future by an acceleration of natural processes. Of course, this could be done because we had a lot of water, and this water we had because of a canal that was dug 500 years ago to connect the Durance with the Rhône, 60 kilometers of canalizations. And the water that passes by our side is a water that's not used for irrigation or for farming, and is basically dumped into the Rhône. So we spoke to the association that deals with this water and asked if we could use this water, pump it into a pond, use the pond to filter the water with water plants, and then use it for irrigation of, in total, 80,000 plants that we have brought to the site. Here you see some CGIs we had made, I think 2014 or 15, also showing a different way of making a park where there's pieces of grass specifically for use by humans, but then there's also more wilder parts where animals can come and stay. And so really, we always imagine a park that would be autonomous in the sense that it's not waiting for people to use it, but people can use it. And that was a very important thing, thinking about what's the park of the 21st century. It's not just a park for people to use. It's a piece of nature that we bring back into the city, that allows different types of uses by different types of living organisms. So you see here some paths are materialized, others are just the way you use the park. So this was an image that we used for a long time before the construction started. And so the buildings were renovated by Annabel Zeldorf, and a new tower has been added by Frank Gehry. So I will show you a bit more how we've built this. So since we could not dig, we had to make our biospheric layer, if you like. So we really built it up with the rocks that had been dug out to make the pond. And then from the bigger rocks to the smaller rocks, we tried to imitate a natural soil in which these trees, these shrubs, and these lower plants could live. And then and I think that was an important moment. We made our own retention layer for water, like an aquifer, like an underground water retention system, from what we learned in Brussels, in a sense. And so all the rainwater is stored within the hill, and even if it overflows, it flows back into the pond. So the idea is that all the water that comes on the side is stored on site and only leaves the site through evaporation. And the evaporation, of course, is a cooling machine. Through evaporation, we can lower the temperature. The paths are permeable, so the whole site is permeable, and it's really an idea or thinking about how we can retain water and feed it to the trees. We used here we brought, of course, we had to make our topography, so we brought material on site, and here you can see the rocks that we used to make those hills. So here you see the little retention for water that we made. So we really try to understand again how nature works and how we can use those logics to make our artificial landscape that allows natural vegetation to grow in. So here you see the shaping of the hills. We brought in big trees, medium trees, and small trees to really make this. And here you see, and it was interesting because when we started planting a year ago, the first trees, we planted them in a semi-desert climate. I mean, that was officially the climatic condition of the site. So we had to plant to change the climate. And we did change this semi-desert climate into a Mediterranean climate. The temperature drops with 8 degrees, but the perceived temperature, which is a combination of Celsius temperature, of humidity, of wind, of radiation, that perceived temperature, the one that you as a human feels, drops with 25 degrees. And so this is a picture taken before the works. So you see this semi-desert climate, absolutely no vegetation, even after 40 years of an abandoned site. This has become now the place for our pond, our water plants, our aquatic plants that you can see here, or again, this picture. The industrial buildings before renovation, and here after renovation with this big lawn. That's conceived as a performing place. We use a special foundation, so you can put up a stage here with a view on the building of Frank Gehry and have a 2,000 people to enjoy a concert, for example. Here from a drone view, you see how we use topography to lay out the irrigation system. And you can also see in what I showed you in the section that in function of the height, the vegetation species become bigger as we advance through time. So this is opened beginning of July this year, and it's growing very fast now. So we're monitoring the growth of the trees, and we do this with sensors that we put in the ground, and we can actually know where the roots are. So we're really doing a very close follow-up of the development of all the vegetation. And together with a scientific center called the Tour du Valat, we are monitoring both the life of the plants, the life in the air, like which birds come to the site, the life in the soil, and the life in the water. And so the idea is that this becomes really an experimentation that other people can see this data and see how we can transform these industrial sites into I would not say a park, but in a new type of park that allows life to come back. What's interesting is that this plant life then attracts animal life, a bit like, if you like, how the atmosphere was created so many years ago. So here, an aerial view before the work started, and then here, our interpretation of what would have happened 200 years from now. I end with a couple of slides, and voilà. And here a beautiful view where you see how this park, this loop of trees that I showed you earlier, connects it with the city center of Arles. And I want to end with a little a short animation that you can see here, where basically the tree is the only element that connects the ground with the air, and through its evaporation creates, as we all know, the atmosphere. So we made this little animation to show that we should rethink urbanism as the interface between the geology that's lying underneath and the meteorology that's lying above. And as we've seen this summer with inundations, floodings, in Belgium, in Austria, with all the fires we had in Greece or in Turkey, we should rethink how our cities, the places where we live, is this fine layer between what's above meteorology and what's below geology. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bas Smets na Dňoch Architektúry a Dizajnu. Bas, thank you very much for your very inspiring presentation. We enjoyed it. We hope you too. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Our pleasure to have you with us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bas Smets bol na linke do Dní architektúry a dizajnu, Dní architektúry a filmu. A sme v závere programu tohto ročníka festivalu, ktorý opäť prebehol v online priestore.